Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the RENNSPORT community events, to our beloved special events. And today is a real special one because, well, we have the 200 miles off-road Atlanta. As some of you might know, right now there's the Petit Le Mans going on over in the States, and in honor of that, we will do 200 miles. So not quite the distance, but still quite the feat for our drivers. And we have some very good ones in here as well, but I also have a very good company here in the booth today in form of Tim Ireland.
Hi, Lino. Twice in 2 days.
What a feat. Yeah, we will have qualifying right now. It's a 20-minute session, so people can get their lap times in. A couple of hypercars, of course, more GT3s. Some returning names, some familiar names, some new names as usual. As Maron Benoda goes a bit wide there, perhaps. But yeah, I think it will be a very interesting race, seeing as Atlanta is a very short and narrow and technical track with two vastly different cars on it. I think that might be very interesting for the race, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a super interesting one to watch. We've got some hypercars, we've got some GT3s involved, so there's a bit of both, and it's going to be interesting to see the first time the hypercars lap the GT3s, how they deal with it around here, because I can't imagine it's an easy place to make that move.
No, it definitely is. You definitely have to play your cards right. You have to be fairly patient. You have to know when to dive in. But of course, our grid isn't as big today as in real life. So
No.
there is a bit more space for the people to work with. Will still be very interesting. In terms of length, the race length will be 79 laps or a maximum of 2 hours. We will run with a time multiplier of 7. That means we will start at 12:10 in-game and finish round about at 10 p.m. depending on how fast the race actually is. So it will be fairly interesting to watch in any capacity how that will change, how that will affect the drivers.
And as some of you may have noticed watching the qualifying, there is damage turned on. So yeah, there's also that to contend with.
Yeah, I mean, damage is, of course, on for the RCEs. And we will continue with that in this event. It's fairly special, I think, currently, but I'm very much looking forward to it. As we see one of the new names, Miro Reguibi, putting it in third at the moment. If we take a look at the timing tower, which is currently led, of course, by the hypercar of Facundo Ginés, I think he might be, perhaps if goes very wide there in turn 1.
Bounce.
And damage. But apart from that, looking at his track record, at his driver stats, he might be the favorite for the hypercar class. Even though you shouldn't talk too early, I guess.
Premature with the commentator's curse there. Going straight in from the beginning.
Should be careful after yesterday's race, for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, not really too familiar with any of the hypercar drivers here, so I think that's another set of unknowns to throw into it for us as commentators. So I think predictions are going to be a fun one.
I mean, Johannes Blum is the only one I recognize out of the bunch driving the hypercars from the Mission R event at Daytona last time around. So yeah, it will be very interesting to see. Currently it's Dominic Ladler leading the GT3 field, but I think that might be fairly interesting, seeing the times between Ladler and Reguibi. It's always interesting to have a new name join in on these races.
Yeah, it's a good welcome surprise to have new people turning up. It's always good to see new people coming to these events and taking part in the longer races, and seeing how they deal with it. Some people have done these kind of things before and understand how to time their pit stops and things, and other people come in cold, and it's a bit of a learning experience.
Of course, these drivers also have a lot of time to adjust in qualifying. And
yes,
on a track like this where overtaking is very hard, definitely is, having a good lap time in is much more crucial than at a place, for example, like Daytona, where we've seen great recovery drives. Of course, you can do that, and you have plenty of time, but it will make your day a bit harder than it has to be.
Yeah, I think at the minute with the qualifying, it's good to get a good lap in, but also there isn't much for practice session before the race, so it's probably a good idea for these guys to try and get used to being around other traffic of different classes and make it a bit less nerve-wracking when it happens in the race.
I mean, for Joachim Thunder here, for example, it might be a bit unusual as well to see so much Audi company. I mean, usually he is fairly alone with the Audi R8 in the grid, but I mean, we have a pretty even split in the GT3 field in terms of Audis and Porsches.
Yeah, there's not much in the way of anything else. It's all Audis and Porsches right now, but which in itself is a bit of an interesting choice. The Audis may be a bit better at Road Atlanta than the others. I don't know.
Well, I feel like it's, let's say it's not as challenging as on other tracks, which is surprising, seeing as Road Atlanta is very bumpy and stuff. But it really suits the characteristics of the Audi.
We've got both the hypercars represented as well. We've got 2 V8s and 1 Porsche 963.
Yeah, that makes also an interesting fact. Jonas Blum currently a bit off the pace to the other two hypercars of Correa and Gines, but I'm sure it will still be interesting for the race nonetheless.
Yeah, he seems to be keeping up okay when I'm watching him going around the track. He's not doing too bad. I think he's just maybe struggling to find a bit of clean air to get a good fast lap in.
Bit surprised by Maron Benauda struggling, because he has taken a bit of a break for understandable reasons. So I'm sure he will find back his mojo. He's one of the fastest guys we have currently. Losing the car over the curbs there, very nasty spot. But he definitely shown in the RENNSPORT Community League what he is capable of.
Yeah. I think maybe coming back to Road Atlanta with damage on for a long race is a bit of a baptism of fire as a comeback race is concerned.
Dominic Ladler's back out again. I mean, he definitely has some work to do, because Mio Uribe, while we were talking about all the race and stuff, he has taken third. Or better said, first in class. So he's definitely flying out there.
And it's pretty close at the minute with the times for the top 3 in the GT3 field. So it's very competitive, even though it's not the biggest field.
Yeah, and I mean, even the 4th place GT3 in the hands of Fernandez Moura isn't too far off. 6/10, of course, on a short circuit is quite a bit, but it's not that far off. I mean, definitely still in for a podium reach.
Yeah, for sure. And that it's not, like you say, it's not a lot of time, especially over the length of race we're doing. Then if you can get behind someone and sit and follow their pace for a while, you can soon pick up a few tricks and maybe shave a few tenths off here and there.
I mean, it seems to be a very good lap now as well. Don't be confused by the sector times. They are, of course, in correlation to Facundo Gines' time in the hypercar. And he does improve by 1.5 tenths, but it just brings him closer to the cars in front.
But it's showing improvement, so, and that'll continue throughout the race, with the race being the kind of distance it is. So I'm sure he'll pick up pace as the race continues, as long as he can keep it clean.
Very much so, and I mean there's still a lot of time left in the qualifying session to put a lap in, but also to get used to everything. Maybe if you say, okay, I'm not gonna improve in terms of lap times, you can settle in for the race already. Might also be an advantage compared to, for example, Dominic Lalla, who is still trying to hunt down Mio Reguibi's time.
Yeah, it can depend on your kind of your philosophy about qualifying, whether it's worth pushing and trying to get those extra 2/10 for Dominic Ladler just to hit pole, or whether it's better settling down and making sure he has a good solid race pace and just working with that.
Oh, Correa, too much curb on the inside. Luckily for these guys, in the end, it still is a simulator.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
they
if only
can...
people
Yeah.
driving the Nordschleife could return to pits, life would be a lot simpler.
Dominic Ladler also on a very good lap here. As for Konogines is now breaking into the 109s. Seven minutes left in the session. Is it enough? No, it's not quite the improvement for Dominic Ladler. Still 1.5 tenths behind Mio Reguibi.
Even with the speed boost from the Founder's livery. Founder's liveries don't really give you a speed boost.
Lot of jumps over those curbs. I mean, the hypercars are very stiffly sprung.
Yeah, it's a bumpy track, and hypercars and bumps generally not the best friends. It does mess with their downforce, which they require a lot of for how they drive. So, yeah, it can be an interesting combo.
Just trying to have a look at Maron Benauda. He seems to find a rhythm.
Yeah, he seems to be improving his pace a little bit now, getting a bit more, maybe getting back into the rhythm of playing RENNSPORT a bit more.
Not quite sure what happened in the second sector there. Oh, and maybe a bit tight from the hypercar. But he has 1 or 2 more laps he can definitely do in this session.
Yeah, it's a short lap for a hypercar, so it's not like it takes them a long time to get around. As long as they leave the pit box with 2.5 minutes, they maybe a bit more, 2 minutes 40 seconds, they should be able to get around and do 2 laps. An out lap and a fast lap.
Let's see, this one looked a bit better. 1.6 in the first sector of the hypercar is okay. 5 seconds is a bit worse, but it can still give him a few position. Oh, too much curb there on the inside. And he calls it quits for this session. So, Bernauda in 7th. He has pulled off some incredible drives before, so let's wait and see. But so far it doesn't seem like he can really settle in for a good rhythm, unfortunately. Of course, that 7th is relative. It will be 4th in class as far as I can see it. Blakey Blake on a lap time, but I don't think that this will be improvement after this sector 1. Maybe he can do another one. There's not much time left in the session, so...
Moen Benuda has picked up a +5 seconds due to exceeding the penalty limit. So that might, I think that's going to put him to the back of the GT3 grid.
And Blakey Blake also going into the pit, saying this for Moen Benuda, trying to get used to the pit entry. Of course, very important for this kind of race. What do you think? We will see 1 stoppers or 2 stoppers?
I think for the GT3s, 1 stop should be. I don't know, because the fixed starting fuel. I think they might have to 2 stop it. I can imagine the hypercars 2 stopping anyway, just because of the tyre wear. I can imagine flat spotting is going to be a problem coming on the big downhill into the left hand of the chicane towards the end. I can imagine that's going to be where the biggest lock-up problem is for them.
Yeah, I would think the same. I mean, with the hypercars, it might actually be the faster way as well. As we see the time is Joachim Thunder with a bit of an issue with the pit lane, unfortunately, in qualifying. Has to start from the very back, but we'll see what he can do. He's very quick, we know that. But it's Facundo Ginés from Rodrigo Correa in the hypercars. As we now wait for the drivers to get ready for the race. It's actually fairly interesting if you take a look at the GT3s, for in your case, Tim. They are perfectly lined up. All Audis on the left, all Porsches on the right. From the front, at least.
Yeah.
It's fairly interesting. Of course, he'll be right back with footage in just a moment's time. But, yeah. As it didn't prove very successful yesterday, I don't think we should pick any favorites for this race, shouldn't we?
You're staying well away from the commentators' curse topic this time then.
Don't want to curse anybody here. But here we go. See the hypercars moving. Those are the GT3s. As said, perfect split. Audi's on the inside, Porsche's on the outside. But the field is led by, well, first of all, the safety car, but then this man. Genies. And we go racing here for the 200 miles off-road Atlanta. Jonas Blum having a pretty good start, actually. Further down, it's Dominic Ladler not being able to really put up a fight into turn 1, but being attacked by the 8 car that should be Maron Benauda as far as I can see it. With the hypercars, it's Genius from Korea from Bloom. Let's take a look at the GT3s.
They all seem to have got off pretty cleanly by the look of it.
Joachim Thunder.
Except Joachim Thunder.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said that too early, I guess. But yeah, really not the racing day he would have hoped for. And Maron Benauda passed Dominic Ladler now. Interestingly enough, so he definitely has found his place. Maybe it's a bit of a deception tactic by the Frenchman.
The hypercars spreading out a little bit at the beginning of the race, which is good for the GT3 drivers. When they try to lap them, there won't be too many people dogfighting while they're doing it.
Well, talking of dogfights, Porsche drivers definitely not holding back against each other. It's Facundo Gines building a gap to Correa. But the biggest challenge will come a bit later in the race once the tires are flat spotted a bit. But Joachim Thunder crawling back to the pits. That looks like heavy damage to the rear left of the car.
Yeah, it seems to be weaving around a little bit there.
Luckily for him,
carry on.
Luckily for him, this race won't count towards his rating, so.
Yeah, we've got BMWs 1 and 2 at the minute in the hypercars, and they're the ones with the digital displays on the side, so they actually show the car position. The 963 Porsche has got the WEC style lights instead of the more WEC style digital number board.
Actually had a hard time really understanding the WEC, and of course it's obvious for the top 3, but everything that comes after that, well, it just doesn't really show you.
Yes.
But, yeah, those are nice features, of course.
Confused me a bit when I first saw it though. So I was like, how on a minute? That's an IMSA car and that's a WEC car.
But I mean, that's the beauty of the racing today, that you can have those cars driving in both classes. Of course, they have to be adjusted a tiny bit, but other than that, they can work just fine. I'm a bit surprised that Jonas Blum is struggling that much. Of course, cold tires and stuff on the hypercar really are a challenge.
Yeah.
And you've all seen the scenes where certain GT3s pass hypercars, for example, at Spa in the WEC and stuff. But it's now Maron Benauda going for the lead in GT3 from way down the grid in qualifying to attacking our fastest car in that very session. Oh, and now that opened up the door for Dominic Ladler, perhaps?
He's got alongside, but he's maybe wisely backing out right now with it being such a long race.
I mean, it's definitely one of the hardest places to overtake in without crashing. Now Bernardo getting up close to Mio, but he's putting up a good defensive drive here. Oh, and Bernardo too much curb there. Of course you have to watch out for those maneuvers, because it can damage your suspension over time.
Yeah, for sure. It's something you've got to worry about, is taking those kind of risks. You don't want to wreck something. Damage isn't just a visual thing, it also affects things you can't see.
Also good to see that Joachim Thunder is driving again. Of course, he's now one lap down behind the leading trio, but yeah, let's see what he can do from there on. And if I see that correctly, the number 12 entry hypercars also on the pits. Oh, and look at that damage on the front.
Oh,
that is a lot of damage to that BMW.
Yeah, that's not going to buff out, is it?
I mean, they can just change it with like 2 clicks, so... These modern racing machines are really... I don't even know how to really describe it. They are so sophisticated in terms of racing. To a crazy level. You can change basically half a car in 2 minutes.
Yeah, they've worked a lot on the ability to fix cars mid-race, and I think the importance of that has kind of ingrained on the engineers' brains over the years, and they've realised that if you can make a car that you can fix really quickly, it's really helpful.
Meanwhile, Mio probably won't be too happy about this, because he was slowed by Johannes Blum, and now sending the dummy down the inside. Oh, but goes round.
Ooh, that was close.
Oh, but not the best of rejoins there, I'm afraid. And again, with Joachim Thunder being the sole victim. Red car still standing there, of course, yellow flags out. Red car there on the outside, that was Joachim Thunder.
Big difference there between the hypercars and the GT3 showing itself. Even on that short straight, the short start-finish straight here at Road Atlanta, they're going immensely quicker.
Dominic Lala now in between 2 hypercars. It's also a position you don't want to be in, because these 2 hypercars, they of course fight amongst themselves as well.
It was a good clean overtake though by Johannes Blum there. He wasn't impatient, he just sat behind Dominic Ladler and waited for the next opportunity.
And now Maron Benauda going for the lead on Dominic Ladler side by side. Dominic Ladler, we've seen that a few laps before, but again backing out of it. And then now leads Maron Benauda, leading the GT3 field, interestingly enough. Nirui seems to have DNF'd from this race, unfortunately. Joachim Thunder is still going, but you can see him on the minimap is going into the pits.
Again.
Really a day that has gone from bad to worse in every way possible.
Yeah, he's had some bad luck. Hopefully he's getting fixed up and putting a full tank of gas in, maybe a new set of tyres, and just put some laps in and see what you can make of it. It's still a long way to go, so you're never sure what's going to happen in the end.
Meanwhile, Dines is already 1 lap up on both other hypercar entries.
Yeah, he's got that dialed in, hasn't he? He seems very comfortable He's easily going around within his own abilities and not pushing the car too much.
He's now coming up to the lead battle of GT3 as well. It's always kind of a, at least when I'm in the faster class, which is not typically the case, but it's always a bit of a strange feeling because you don't want to interrupt that fight, or any fight to be honest, but you also want to get past as soon as possible to not get in the fight on your own.
Yeah, it won't be too bad today with him having so much of a gap to the second place. He's not in too much of a rush to get past, obviously, so he can maybe wait until a nice safe opportunity arises and then make his move and try and get past both cars at once,
which he also does. But there you can see the crazy difference in speed on the straight line. But what I like most about the hypercars is, I think, the compatibility with the GT3 cars they have. Because with the previous generation, we've talked about it, I think, yesterday, with the LMP1 cars, they were absolute monsters, like completely outrageous in a way.
Yes.
But that meant that they are also... See, now puts a lap on Johannes Blum. Respecting the blue flags there. But that also always had the issue of them being much faster in the corners, in the braking zones, pretty much everywhere. So you had every corner in the GT3 or GTE class back then. The fear of just an LMP1 lodging it down the inside because it was that much better at braking, turning, everything.
Yes.
Makes it also hard for the LMP1 car, of course. It was a nice element of racing, but with these hypercars, they, of course, have more downforce. They are faster and all that, but they are not as OP through the turns as to, and especially in the braking zones, to just overrun the GT3s. You can run with the GT3s through the turn without losing too much time. And I think that was such a big improvement.
Yeah, and they're not quite as incentivized to make last-minute dives into corners as they were perhaps in the LMDH cars, sorry. Where, because they were so much better on the brakes, they could just chuck it down the inside and brake at the last minute, and then leave a startled GT3 out to try.
Oh, Merwan Benauda is on the grass. Can he keep it out of the wall? Oh, big hit there. Not quite sure who would put a wall in that place.
The good people at Road Atlanta.
Yeah, fair point. But heavy damage to the front left of that Porsche.
Yeah, he's gone for the controversial extra tire cooling technique of smashing his wing off.
It doesn't even cool the tires because he still has the wheel arch, the inner wheel arch on
yeah,
it.
That's true.
So it doesn't necessarily help him. Behind him, that's Fernandez Mura, who will pretty much surely take that position now. I mean, nothing is done in this race. We are only 1/8 of the way through. But yeah, still, he had done such a good performance up until this point.
Something must have happened to Rodrigo Correa because they've DNF'd from the hypercar class.
It's gone mod for with Johannes Blum for a few chances. Oh, maybe not the best. I didn't know the commentator's curse also works with camera.
Yeah, there's the cameraman curse as well as the commentator's curse. You've got responsibility for both of those today.
What exactly should I do with that information now? Can hear a few lockups here and there. Of course, that will drastically increase our time once you have a flat spot on your tire. Makes it all the more harder.
Yeah, once you get one, it's every time you start braking, that flat spot naturally becomes a place for it to lock up again, and it makes the flat spot worse and worse over time. So it's very much a problem that doesn't fix itself.
Doesn't seem to be an issue for the man leading this race, Facundo Ginés from Argentina. Of course, if you want to follow live timings and all the info you would want, you can always find it in the app. But again, you have to look for custom contest, not official, in your filters. Field is kind of dragged out very far at this point already.
Yeah, it's the Road Atlanta effect, I think you might call it, where it can be a tricky course circuit to drive, and if you do have an accident, it can be a big one. So the drivers can quite easily spread out if they aren't on each other's tail and keeping it clean.
Bernardo has repaired his car and is now back on track. Let's see if we have to do another pit stop or not later in the race. I mean, we've seen that. I'm not quite sure. I think it might have been in a community league event where we had someone pitting very early, getting out of rhythm for a similar reason, but coming back. Oh, and that's not how you come back from an incident like this. And
that was a big crash again.
It's the quarter panel on the other side that he hit off this time.
Just trying to smash them all one after another.
It's also a very tricky part of the track to get past.
Dominic Ladler doing what Dominic Ladler do, and he's just staying nice and consistent and keeping it on track and not getting into any trouble, which I think is fully what I would expect to see from him.
Feels like he has a bit of a fight with Johannes Bream, even though these two cars are definitely in different classes. I mean, Dominic Ladler can definitely take it easy now. Because unfortunately, Maron Bernardo has also DNF from this race. Joachim Thunder not being able to carry on, fortunately, as well.
Yeah,
so
Maron Bernardo has obviously run out of Porsche, Audi spares at this point. No, Porsche spares. He was a Porsche driver.
Yeah.
I know cars.
Did you see that drift from Dominic Ladler right there?
It was a good one. I liked it. Showing off as showboating, passing a hypercar.
I mean, you can show off, but I wouldn't do that at this corner specifically.
Now, although I have a handbrake on my sim rig, unfortunately, I don't think that any of the current cars we have in RENNSPORT have handbrakes, so it doesn't work. I have tried drifting before, but yanking on my handbrake doesn't seem to do anything.
Well, I mean, race cars don't really have handbrakes usually. I'm not sure about the touring cars. I know that the old TC cars had it, but the current regulations, I don't think they have handbrakes. Hypercars
I think
definitely don't have handbrakes.
No, I think the touring cars have one, but it's like like a bicycle brake hand lever on the sequential handle, and they just use it for starting, and that's it.
Yeah, something like that could be it. Not quite sure on this front, to be honest. But Yeah, I mean, hypercars definitely don't have handbrakes. GT3 cars definitely don't have handbrakes.
Porsche Cup maybe does.
I don't think so. I mean,
Let me
you
drift.
probably know that scene of the KTM Crossbow GTX at the Nordschleife a couple of years ago. Set on fire but parked at the entry to Foxhole, like in the inside of Arenberg, and just rolling
Oh,
down the hill because you can't put that car in park. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't have a parking position, doesn't have a handbrake.
yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, and they were like, yeah, and I think like the driver and some of the marshals were kind of like running after it.
I mean, of course, the KTM isn't heavy, but I don't think you can really stop it once it starts rolling by hand.
Especially when it's on fire.
Yeah, then you probably don't want to. Or you shouldn't, rather said. Don't play with fire. I'm lucky that I have a bit of a different habit in terms of injury.
Okay.
Like, I do work on cars.
Yep.
And what so far happened to me on every major project I worked on is that at some point, but only once, but at some point I slipped off something and hit, well, first it was like the outer sides of my hands, and then recently it was my arm, on a sharp metal plate, and therefore always have like a mark there afterwards because like it doesn't heal again. Like,
Yeah.
how do they call them?
Scars.
Yeah, like a scar. I mean, it saves the money for a tattoo, I guess. So wouldn't recommend doing it anyways. Oh,
What
and
do you think?
Ginés losing it trying to go down the inside of Dominic Lala. That one is interesting. He's done so good until this point.
That was a stylish turn, though.
Definitely. I think he tried to go down the inside of Lala, who also left the space open. But
Yeah.
the thing is, there is like a bump on the inside, a very nasty one in those hypercars, which when you take it from the outside and drive to the inside, it's perpendicular to the car, so you have just one small jump. But when you
Yeah.
go inside to inside, what he tried to do, it can throw your car off very nasty. Oh, and I think that is the car of Jonas Blum in the wall there.
Yeah.
Seems like there isn't too much damage.
Maybe.
It looks like it's crabbing a bit.
Yeah, it's definitely done something to his steering, but it doesn't look too bad. Yeah, the other danger with the hypercars overtaking the GT3s is because they have to go slower, obviously, to get past the GT3, they lose a bunch of downforce on corners, and it's not something that if you've just been kind of hot lapping your hypercar, you won't have really experienced it so much, and it can catch you out.
I mean, especially since hyper or in general downforce is not a linear process.
No.
It's not like you go 5 kph faster, you lose exactly this amount of downforce. You lose way more. So that's always something to factor in as we now go on board with Dominic Lala, and Facundo Ginés should fly by any second now.
It didn't take him long to catch back up, did it?
I mean, it shouldn't.
But at least this time he's got the big straight. He's still a second and a half behind, but probably was on my screen. On your screen he's well past.
I mean, that is pretty much the ideal scenario you can have for rabbits.
Yeah. The cars, as they are starting to run low on fuel, so we can expect to see some pit stops soon.
Blakey
Some
being the
scheduled
first
pit
one.
stops. Blakey changing tyres. which is fine. He's currently last, so he's not going to lose anything by changing tyres. He might gain something in a bit of pace. Not taking on a lot of fuel, though. So he's definitely going to have to come back in again at some point.
I'm a bit surprised to where Blakey Blake has gone. Because I can't find him on the map.
No, he seems to have gone DNF now as well.
But he's not quite DNF as well.
No. Ginner's not opting to pit this lap, and he's not got a lot of fuel left, so I hope he's got a lot of battery. I can't see his battery level. I can only see his fuel level right now.
Well, you wouldn't really want to rely on your battery to get back into the pits.
You wouldn't think so.
Bloom is in the pits though, so...
Dominic Ladler also carrying on. They do get an indication in the in-game HUD of how many laps their current fuel will allow them to finish, so I'm sure he understands when and where he's got to pit.
Engineers coming into the pits right now. There's the sign, 90 kph the speed limit here in Road Atlanta. I find it like, it's quite a lot for such a short circuit.
Yes, yeah, it's good in a hypercar because you don't feel like you're crawling.
Dominic Lala also coming in now.
Oh. Ginner's feeling confident in his car. He's not changing tyres.
Well, it's not really like he needs the tire advantage at the moment. Fernandez Moura, though, is still driving. He has some damage to the front left of his car, but currently in second position in the GT3 class, so... That's what we've talked about yesterday, isn't it?
Yeah. He's, yeah, Mora's filled right up. So he's obviously planning to go until the end of the race on his current load. He's got a nice clean car. He's got no damage. So he might as well. Ginner's also topping his tank as far as he can go.
I really like the sound on that BMW, though. Typically, I'm not the... Well, I don't want to say I'm not a fan of typical German or European V8s. They can sound absolutely fantastic. In all fairness, I'm more of an American V8 type of guy.
Yeah.
But the one that they strap in the back of the BMW is actually kind of decent. Oh, but Genius into the wall very hard.
Oh. So just coming out of the pits, it looks like he's going to have to go back in there again.
Very much so. Where's Johannes Blum? Of course, he is a lap down. But, I mean, with that amount of damage, and now Dominic Lala approaching the scene as well. We've seen a BMW damage like that before.
Yeah. He's going to have to be very twitchy taking it back round to the pits.
This car's not a lot of fun to drive at the moment. I think we can all
No.
tell that.
You can see just how much quicker the GT3 is there than a damaged hypercar.
But it does open up the gates for Jonas Blum. He's 2 laps down.
Even with a damaged hypercar, though, Gines managing to squeeze past Dominic Ladler again on the long straight.
It's just a question if you really want to do that, but he comes into the pits. Not getting a drive through, hopefully.
Going nice and sideways there.
Do you think Dominic Ladler might take over the lead of the